let's talk about the absolute ridiculous number of books I bought during the quarantine. I bought a ton of books this year. It was a problem. I talked about this in my reading goals video, I believe. I'm trying to buy no books this year. Well, actually that's a lie. I'm still buying books if I've read them and love them and I want to add them to my collection, because that's pretty rare. I'd say 1 out of every 10 books is maybe a book I want to add to my collection and read again. But I'm no longer buying books I haven't read yet. But I did buy a ton of books last year during the pandemic because, you know, I just needed something to get me out of my funk. So sit back and enjoy a probably 2-hour-long video because I have a ton of books to haul. I actually already put away half the books I bought during the quarantine because there was just too many. It was taking over my entire room. So this is actually only half the books I bought. I might split this up into 2 parts because honestly this is gonna take forever. But let's just start so that I can put the rest of these away. The first book here is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is a very Agatha Christie type mystery where a bunch of people go to a wedding on an island and then they start disappearing one by one. If you've seen Harper's Island, that's what this reminds me of. Next is The Girl Next Door by Cant Catch Me. I've been wanting to read this book for a while. I've heard it is just like over the top, terrible and gory, and like I love that shit. I had a hard time weirdly finding this book because every time I went to buy the book it was actually the screenplay, so that was annoying. I don't know a ton about this other than just that it is absolutely like balls to the wall, over the top, gross horror. And I'm into that. Next is The Wicked Girls by Alex Marwood. This is about 2 12-year-old girls who get charged with murder in a small town, and then, you know, 20 years later an investigator comes back and tries to figure out like what happened or something, or if there's a connection to the new murders in the town. I've always been intrigued by the idea of like child murderers because it does happen and it's really fucking weird. Next book I have here is The Devil in Silver by Victor LaValle. I've heard great things about Victor LaValle and that he's a great horror writer. I really want to get into more horror this year, as I mentioned during my goals video. I did read Victor LaValle's Destroyer comic book and I enjoyed that, so hopefully I will enjoy this as well. I don't know a ton about this other than that there is some sort of bison that is haunting this man who may or may not have convicted a crime. I'm intrigued. That reminds me kind of The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, where they're haunted by a entity of sorts, and I fucking loved that. So I'm hoping I love this just as much. Next up is The Innocent Wife by Amy Lloyd. I heard about this one actually on the My Favorite Murder podcast. I'm kind of thinking of doing a reading vlog of like all the different books that Karen and Georgia have mentioned on that podcast. If I seem distracted, my cats are losing their minds. I want to read this now. So this is about a woman who falls in love with a convicted felon, and eventually a true crime documentary gets made trying to free him, I guess. Obviously you see things like this happen all the time. This reminds me of like, say, the West Memphis 3 case. I was actually just reading up on Damien Eccles and Laurie Davis's love story, so like this kind of reminds me of that. Next is The Shadows by Alex North. I actually didn't realize I bought this. This is just like another example of why I need to stop buying books, because I've actually lost interest in reading this since hearing more reviews, because I've heard that a lot of what happens in this takes place in dreams, and that is one of my biggest pet peeves. I don't care about characters' dreams. I hate it so much. I also don't like things that have to do with a group of boys like coming of age and investigating spooky shit and whatever. It's all very Stephen King-esque, and if you know me, you know I'm not into that. So I'm not super interested in this anymore, and I'm just gonna move along. The next thing that I bought is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is about a woman, I believe, who stabbed her husband a bunch of times, but she hasn't talked since, and there is a doctor who's trying to make her speak, or like get the truth out of her. This was obviously very, very beloved at one point. I've heard a lot of dissenting opinions since then because, of course, anytime something gets like super, super popular, there are going to be people who are like, yeah, that's overhyped. I do it all the time. But I'm still really interested in reading this. I've heard the twist is great, and so far I haven't been spoiled. Let's hope that continues. Wow, once again, why do I buy these things? Next thing I bought is I Hunt Killers by Barry Lyga. I'm trying to read less YA this year, so... But you know, I bought this during a crazy buying spree, clearly. This is about a kid whose dad is a serial killer, and I think the kid like hooks up with the police or something to try and solve crimes. I do like that sort of idea. So I might enjoy it. Maybe I'll use it for a readathon at some point as an easy read, but something tells me I probably won't want to read the rest of the series. I did read Boy Toy by Barry Lyga when I was in high school and I loved it, so who knows, maybe I'll love it, maybe I won't. Hard to say. The next thing I have here is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. I've never read anything by Alyssa Cole because I know she does a lot of romance, and I'm not really into typical romance. I very much am more in the like super dark romance sphere, but when I heard about this, really wanted to read it. I know this is a thriller and it's about gentrification and like weird shit happening in the neighborhood, and this was honestly one of the books I was the most excited about in 2020, but of course I didn't read it because I'm terrible about reading my physical books. Another reason I shouldn't be buying more books. But I'm very excited to get to this. This needs to happen in 2021. Next books I have here is Rotters by Daniel Kraus. I read Bent Heavens by Daniel Kraus last year and loved it. I know most people didn't, but I was totally into it, and so I wanted to pick up his other work. I'm not totally sure what this is about. It seems to have something to do with grave robbing. I like the cover and it seems like it'll be like dark and spooky and whatever, so hopefully I'll enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Bent Heavens. The next book I have is The Plague Stones by James Brogdon. I believe I heard about this in Harpies in the Trees channel. Once again, I just really want to get into more horror. I believe this probably has something to do with witches. That's my guess. It seems to have something to do with rituals and stuff, which isn't normally my forte, but like I said, I'm just really trying to find what I enjoy in the horror genre, and I'm really willing to try pretty much anything at this point. Next book is The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. I started to read The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, is that what it's called? By Stuart Turton, and I really liked what I read, but I was just finding it really dense and I didn't end up finishing it. I really want to get back to it, but I knew that like I liked it enough that I wanted to read more of his work, and when this came out it sounded in a similar vein, so I picked it up. I know this is some sort of mystery that takes place on a ship, and I know it has some sort of time playing element just like his first book did, which I really love in pretty much any genre, so I'm excited to check this out. I love anything that takes a mystery and puts a little bit of a spin on it, especially if it has some sort of sci-fi twist to it. Love that. Alright. I feel like I need to get through these faster. Intensity by Dean Koontz. I read whatever the other one that sounds like this is. Velocity by Dean Koontz, and I hated it. Like really truly hated it. But obviously Dean Koontz is a ridiculously popular author, and I've never read anything else from him, so I wanted to give him another shot. This seems to be one of his most popular books. So here I am trying it out. I have no idea what it's about, but because it's like a thriller or something, I feel like going in blind is fine. Never Never by James Patterson and Candace Fox. This is another instance of just like, oh, that author is so popular, I should figure out what that's about because I've never read anything from them. I know this is another detective story. I love crime stories. I know they're not popular here on BookTube, but I love any sort of procedural story. I love procedural TV shows too, so I guess that shows what an 80-year-old grandma I am at heart. All I know is that this takes place in Australia, which that's fun. I don't read a lot of books there, and I'm sure it'll be fine. Then I've got Secret Smile by Nikki French. I believe this has something to do with like a toxic or abusive relationship or something. A dude hooks up with this girl's sister and she's trying to get rid of him. I'm not sure. Nikki French is another like really popular thriller author that I haven't read from before, so I picked up these books on like thrift books when they were super cheap. Another thing I picked up, I guess, was the Bloody Mary saga by Hilary Monahan. I swear I must have been in a brain fog when I picked up half these books because I truly don't remember this, or I picked it up for free shipping on some sort of order because that happens a lot. I think we all know what Bloody Mary is about. I've always been interested in Bloody Mary ever since the fifth episode, I think, of Supernatural, because that was like one of my favorite episodes in the first season, so I have a feeling that's why I picked this up, which is a very stupid reason. Next two books I definitely got from Chapters because they always have mass market paperbacks for 2 for $15. So I got Zero Sum Game by S.L. Huang and The Rumor by Leslie Cara. I don't totally know what this is about, but it mentions The Matrix, which I've never seen and had no desire to, so that's unfortunate. But I know it has something to do with like calculus and crap, and somehow that allows her to defeat armed gunmen or something, so that sounds nerdy and kind of fun, so I'm into it. The rumor seems to be about a serial killer or just some sort of killer who murdered someone as a child and now they're living in town, and a rumor goes around about this person who's infiltrated their town. And I'm guessing something like shocking happens because of this rumor. Which kind of reminds me of the movie Boy A or maybe even Karla Homolka situation here in Canada. I'm intrigued. I'm excited. I love thrillers, clearly. Next book is We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. I saw this movie a while ago, and I used to always be the type where if I've seen the movie, I won't read the book because you need to read the book before you see the movie. But last year I read The Exorcist, and that's probably a movie I've seen the most amount of times. I've probably seen that movie like 800 times in my life, and I loved reading the book, which I totally wasn't expecting. So now I'm more open to reading books after I've seen the movie. We Need to Talk About Kevin is about a boy who commits a heinous crime at their school, and it's kind of about just like their life leading up to that moment and seeing him through the mother's eyes and whether or not she could have seen any signs. I did not love the movie. I found it very confusing. The ending was very well done, but every other part of it I didn't enjoy so much, but I do like the idea of the story. So I'm intrigued to check out this book, and I'm hoping I like it, even though I haven't heard the best things. The next couple books I picked up because I've read things from these authors before and absolutely love them. The first two are by Stephen Graham Jones. I've read 2 books by Stephen Graham Jones in the past, one of which I really didn't like, but I kind of feel like it was because of the writing style, whereas the other one I absolutely loved. So I'm very intrigued to pick out more of his work. Mapping the Interior and Mongrels are the ones I picked up. I actually bought this one twice by accident, so I have another copy of this lying around somewhere. Oh, I'm wrong. I've actually read a third thing by Stephen Graham Jones as well. And that I gave like 3.5 stars. So I do think I will like these. I have faith. I think he does really unique, interesting premises, so I'm very excited to get to these. And then the other thing I picked up because I like the author a lot is The Witch Elm by Tana French. I've read 2 Tana French books in her series that she does, her detective series, and fucking love them so much. I read both of them last year, and they are 2 of my favorite books I read last year. This is a standalone book. This is about a man who catches 2 people burglarizing his home, I believe, and he gets injured, and now he has to go to his ancestral home where some weird shit is happening. The thing about Tana French is she does a lot of very like introspective character studies, and they're sublime. I'm hoping this is more of that, and if it is, I'm sure I'll love it. I picked up another book by Alex Marwood, even though I've never read from this author. This one's called The Poison Garden. I believe that this is about some sort of cult and an actual poison garden. Yeah, so a mysterious and sinister apocalypse cult are found dead, poisoned by their isolated community in North Wales. I love anything having to do with cults. I mean, I don't actually love cults themselves, but I always find cults interesting and how you would get taken up with that. So the idea of someone surviving that after things go horribly wrong is very interesting to me. The next thing I have here is Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I believe this is like a YA detective story. I read many of these last year. Just in general, I tend to love this sort of thing. I'm hoping, of course, that it will be like Veronica Mars-ish, but I probably shouldn't put that sort of expectation on it because it's just bound to let me down. But I've heard somewhat good things. I believe I've heard Emma Books talk about this, and I'm hoping I'll at least enjoy it somewhat. I am trying to read less YA, but if I am going to read YA, I feel like this is more in vein of what I am more willing to pick up. We are not even halfway done. Alright, the next thing I picked up, The Only Child by Mie So. I'm probably saying that wrong. If so, I'm so sorry. I believe it's about a woman who is interviewing a man in prison who is a serial killer who's never spoken to anyone before. And there also seems to be another story going on with a strange little girl showing up unexpectedly. I don't totally know what this is about, but it's a thriller, so I guess the less I know going in, the more it might surprise me. I've heard very little about this book. I feel like I heard a little bit when it first came out, which is what got me to pick it up, obviously, but then I never heard anything after that, which could be a very good or a very bad thing. The next thing I picked up was One Was Lost by Natalie D. Richards. I read a Natalie D. Richards book last year and actually enjoyed it pretty decently, so once again, this is YA, so, but if I am gonna read YA, I guess it should at least be something horror-y or thriller-y. This is about some students who get kind of stranded on a school trip and they're being stalked through the woods. Obviously, when you see this cover, you kind of think Blair Witch-esque. I've actually never seen the original Blair Witch, but I did see the remake and it was fine. I do think that this sort of thing can work, and I think in book form it'll actually be really interesting. Next thing I picked up is You Can't Catch Me by Catherine Mackenzie. I hate this cover, let me just say. I believe this is about some sort of journalist who goes away on a vacation to Mexico and meets someone with the exact same name as her, and they play a game and they exchange information, and when she gets home she's had her identity stolen. I haven't heard anything about this. Once again, hopefully that'll turn out to be a good thing because hopefully it'll surprise me. Next thing I picked up was The Hollow Ones by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. I feel like I heard surprisingly little about this considering Guillermo del Toro was behind it, because he's obviously a very big name in the film industry, so I would have expected to heard more, but this synopsis is rather vague. All it says is some stuff about an FBI agent, which once again, I enjoy crime books. Guillermo del Toro does a lot of fantasy horror type of things, and I'm hoping that maybe this will include some of that because that would be really interesting. The next book I have here is Bunny by Mona Awad. This obviously took a booktube by storm this year, so I'm not really going to sit here and explain what it's about. I love this cover. I bought it specifically because of how cute it is. I know there are other covers out there, and honestly I want them all. They're so cool. I love that this has very mixed but very strong opinions, and hopefully I'll be one of the ones who love it. The next thing I have here is A Cosmology of Monsters by Sean Hamill. This sounds confusing and I honestly don't really understand the premise. Once upon a time when I bought the book, I knew the premise, but yeah. I really thought I was better at knowing premises when I hauled books, but no, I'm doing terrible at it. The next thing I have here is The King's Men by Nora Sakavic. I read this entire trilogy last year. This is about Neil Johnston, who's like running from the mob essentially, and he joins this like private school to play Exy, which is like some weird version of lacrosse, I think. Anyways, this trilogy is terrible and wonderful in equal parts. I absolutely loved it. It's not great writing wise or representation wise, but it's just one of those guilty pleasures that you totally binge and fall in love with all the weird ass characters. And yeah, so I bought the whole trilogy because I know I'm gonna read it again. The next three books are all heist books. I absolutely love heist movies. They are one of my favorite subgenres of movies ever. I don't know why, they just are. At some point I'd like to do a reading vlog just reading heist books because I don't think I've ever read one other than Six of Crows. So I've got A Simple Plan by Scott Smith, Just Watch Me by Jeff Lindsay, and Ghost Man by Roger Hobbs. The next book I got here is One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. This is about a plus-size girl. This is about a plus-size girl who decides to become essentially the Bachelorette. This obviously also took booktube by storm a little bit, and most people seem to have loved it. I don't love romance things. I hate The Bachelorette, so what drove me to pick this up, I'm not sure, but I did, and eventually I will read it. The next thing I picked up is The Lucky Ones by Tiffany Reese. I am on a quest to read everything Tiffany Reese has ever wrote. She is, I think, my first auto-buy author ever. She's just fantastic. I've read, I don't even know, at least 7 or 8 books by her now. I've read the entirety of her, I read her trilogy, The Red, The Rose, and The Pearl. Loved it. I read the first 4 books in her original Sinners series, and it is one of my favorite series ever now, so I had to pick up her standalone work as well. She mostly writes erotica work, so I have no idea if this is or if this is just a thriller, but either way, I'm sure I'm going to read it because Tiffany Reese does a great job at writing really complex characters, so I'm really looking forward to this, whether it's smutty or not. It's about a girl who is orphaned who comes back to her adopted family after one of her parents died or is dying, and she has to go back home and confront her past. Speaking of some books I have read and loved, These are all books that I just like completely, absolutely adore and bought for my own collection. This is The Rose by Tiffany Reese. This is the second book in her series. I actually don't know what the series is called. But like I said, it's the first book is The Red, the second book is The Rose, and then the third is The Pearl. This series has some of the most unique sex scenes that I've ever read. If you want to hear more about them, I have other videos talking about these books because I absolutely adore them. The next two books I have are A Lesson in Thorns and Feast of Sparks by Sierra Simone. These books also got pretty popular here on BookTube in the smug community. These take place in the Thorn Chapel series. These are the first two books in it. It's about a group of friends who are kind of drawn back to this mansion, and they have some sexy times together, and it is fucking wonderful. And then the next book is The Devil by Ashley Jade. This is a duology about these three individuals who are all interconnected in some sexy ways. It's very dark. It takes place at school in the past, but it also takes place in the present, and I'm not going to explain the whole thing here, but if you love dark romance, this is twisted and amazing. And I think I'm going to save the rest for another video because we're only halfway through, and this seems like a lot. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope you'll come back again soon. Bye.